Press record, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Likutei Torah, Parshat Chukat. We'll learn this Maimer on page 122, second column. Okay, the pasuk says, that anyway, the Jews started complaining about Hashem. Hashem brought all the snakes. They started biting the Yidden, and they were dying. So he came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, we sinned. So Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, make this Sarah, put him on a banner, and Moshe Rabbeinu made Nechash and Nechoshes. Nechash and Nechoshes means a copper snake. He said, B'med Mishnah, in the Mishnah it says, and the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah said, when the Yidden looked upwards, and the Mishnah says like this, did the Nachash kill you or not kill you? I mean, what does it mean? So it says, when the Jews looked up to Hashem, so then they were alive. When they didn't look up to Hashem, they died. So he said, because Shalom Alei Nachash Klal, why did they have to make a Nachash if that's the case? It says not a Nachash, it's looking up and looking down, looking up to Hashem and not looking up to Hashem. So it means is if somebody got bitten by a snake, so then they wanted to get better, so then that caused them to look up. Very Mao is Takus Kabi Maila. Why did they have to look up? By Tefillah it says, Ein of Lamata. You're supposed to look down. Here we're saying they had to look, it's Tako Klapi Maila, they had to look up. But L'chayri, the Alter Rebbe asks, Al Mevor Binyanat Tefillah, Sheina Ein of Lamata V'libe L'mayla. L'chayri is not looking up, it's looking down. Looking down means to realize your bittul and stuff. So he says, L'hav and Zen, to understand this whole concept of the Nechash and Nechoshes, with this whole thing, the purpose of the neshama coming into this world, what is the primary purpose of the neshama in the world? To connect to their creator, with love and fear. Right? That's the primary thing. The primary connection is davening. We learned many times the word tefillah has many meanings. One is lefalel, to be judged. The time you daven, yes, Hashem for stuff, he's judging us. Another interpretation is tefillah, Rashi says is chibur, binding. Naftuli, Rashi says loshen chibur. There's a din atefel kli cheres. There's a broken kli cheres, there is a vessel and you glue it. So tefillah means connecting. He says, because when you daven, you look at the simple words of davening. It's in our understanding. We can get it. You know, the sun, the moon, the alulukas, you know, how great Hashem is. These are all things we can understand. So there's no question before the neshama comes down. After the neshama passes away, minagov, the Alter Rebbe is asking like this. The whole purpose of a neshama is to have ava v'yira. So he asked before the neshama comes down, there's greater ava v'yira. After the neshama leaves the body, there's greater ava v'yira. So what's the purpose of a neshama coming into the world? To have ava v'yira when the body gets in the world. Shaguf eina manicha lavedas Hashem. Like the body, it makes it hard to serve Hashem, because of its coarseness. Neshama is going to force the neshama even to have gufniistic pleasure. So what's the purpose of the neshama? And he says, even though the neshama itself doesn't want all these gashmiistic things. Because the source where it's carved out from is even down here in the body really wants to connect to Hashem. But the bottom line is the body doesn't let it. It says like this. It says in the Zayah, Whoever does not transform bitterness, meaning world, to sweetness, lest they chulka b'hai olam klum. There's no share in chelik in olam haba, whatever that means. But the bottom line is that we see the purpose of kizar kol ha'adam le'nivra ele b'shvil zeh. Okay, the whole purpose of the creation of a person is to have ava v'yira in a body. That's the whole purpose of creation. Shari b'bayis rishon lo haya mispalel klal. They didn't daven like we have today. Why? Gam b'bayis sheni tiknu anshe knesset k'red tefillah k'tzara. Even it, okay, so it's like this. Who instituted davening the way with the nusach of davening the way we have it today? Anshe knesset k'red. They lived at the beginning of the second base of Mikdash. That means in the first base of Mikdash, there was a mitzvah to daven. I'm not getting into the whole argument in Nigla about davening and Torah and Rabbanan, but simply everybody says that if you have a problem, you have a need, it's a biblical mitzvah to daven to Hashem. This that we daven 3 times a day, that the Chacham instituted. Even though it says, some Chassidus writes, whoever it says, Tefillah Bizmana says, only rabbinic, never saw lights in their days. Okay, but there's no question that the whole text of davening, the Shemona Esrei, everything, was instituted by Anshe Knesset Gedolah. Right? And even the Bracha B'Lam Mashinim came almost at the end, in Shmuel HaKatan's time, almost at the end of the second base of Mikdash. So in Bayis Rishon, they didn't daven at all, in the form of davening that we have today. They call Aveda Sholahem, and therefore their Aveda Lahaya Kimal Derech Zeh. What was their Aveda? Lahapach Miriru Lemiska. To transform bitterness to sweetness. But l'cheira, why is the neshama coming into the world? If it's to have Ava V'yira, it has Ava V'yira more before and after, rather than during. So he says, the inyan is like this. Ki adinim nimtokim b'sharsha. It says all dinim get sweetened in the source. Many times, for instance, you bring the Aravis, the Hishainus, 5 times on the ground. Why? Because the Hishainer represents the Aravis, Gevura. No taste, no smell, no level of Gevura. You bang it 5 times on the ground to sweeten the 5 levels of Gevura. So, but where do you get this? Where do you have the ability to sweeten the 5 levels of Gevura? In the source. Dinei, kol roes v'dinim rachman l'tzlan. Shenesavu ba'elam, all these evil and problems in the world, shasham u'makayram u'machaya eisem u'teiv. Really, the source of everything in Elokus is good. Right? There's no evil. As far as Hashem concerned, ein ra yerim in Hashemayim, there's no evil coming down from heaven. Everything Hashem does is good. In the source, all good is really, all evil is good. Everything's good. But, so in the source, it's all good. And he says, it's like the marshal that Rebbe brings us down in Tanya, that about the Yetzer Hara, in fact. The Yetzer Hara's whole purpose is like the marshal, it calls the Zohar, that what was it? The king wanted to test the morals of the son, of his son, the prince. So what did he do? He hired a Zaina to try to convince the kid to sin. Now, the king doesn't want him to sin. The Zaina realizes that he's a Ben Melech. It's not appropriate for him to sin. Yeah, what does she do? In order to bring out the strength of the child, of the prince, she puts on all her charm to try to convince the kid to sin, even though down deep, really, the purpose of this whole spiel is that he shouldn't sin. And the Zohar says that's what the Yetzer Hara is. Yetzer Hara is the creation of Hashem. In fact, at the end of creation, it says, so Zohar, the Medrash says, Teiv is the Malach of Chaim, Teiv Ma'ed is the Malach HaMavis. How can you... Teiv Ma'ed? But the Gemara says, who has Satan? I'm sorry, who has Yetzer Hara, who has Satan? No, Malach HaMavis. First, the Yetzer Hara gets you to sin. then the Satan prosecutes you, and then the Malach HaMavis takes care of you. But it's the same guy. It's the same Malach. So why was the Malach created? Why was this Yetzer Hara created? To try to convince the Jew to sin, begging and praying that he won't sin. Because so in essence, the Yetzer Hara is good. In the source, in the reason of it all, it's good. So he says, Shekol chefza l'tzeina v'chefza. The whole will and desire of the Zaina is shalei l'tzayis, not to listen, that the Ben Melech should not listen to her. Ubezat tesanig yaser, and this shall have more pleasure, shall yitu aba l'melech, that should be love to the king. Masha'en ken shemefata eisei v'tuchalei, ain't the ratzon HaMelech. In other words, when the Zaina tries to convince the son and he doesn't listen, the king is going to be more appreciative to the Zaina. But if she convinces the kid to sin, the king's not going to be happy with her. I mean, the mission wasn't accomplished. This is what the Gemara says in Sukkah, Satan upnina l'shem shemayim niskavnu. The Satan is l'shem shemayim. In other words, when the Satan, but again, it's the Yetzer Hara, the Malach, when they try to convince it, they mean l'shem shemayim, you shouldn't listen. Pnina was the first day of Rosh Hashanah, when there was two wives, Elkanah had two wives, Chana and Pnina, and Pnina used to torture Chana, basically, telling her, you don't have kids. So it says she was a tzaddikas, Pnina. Why did she do it? Not chas v'sham to make fun. She knew Chana was so great that if she davened, Hashem would listen to her. So Chana, it says in the Medrash, and Chassidus brings it down, if you look at the Avis, Hashem made him suffer. Avram didn't have kids. Yitzchak didn't have kids for a long period of time. Yaakov had to deal with an Yosef. So the Medrash says, why did Hashem make they were such holy tzaddikim, why did Hashem make him suffer? So it sounds a little selfish from Hashem's perspective, but chas v'shalom to say that. It says, Hashem loves when tzaddikim daven. Hashem just enjoys when tzaddikim daven. So how does he get the tzaddikim to daven? If they would have kids, they wouldn't daven. So Hashem made Avraham Avinu childless at the beginning. Why? Because you should daven and get a kid. In other words, Hashem wanted to bring out a deeper level. So he says, Hashem, the Satan gave his eyes in the first base of Mikdash, and it was destroyed. Mamash in his Kanabi. The source of Ra, that gives existence to the Nefesh Habamas, the Yetzer Hara, it's all the same stuff, yeah? Is really Teiv. It's really good. Not only Teiv, it's Teiv made. Is there a servant that rebels against the master? In other words, a servant is bottled to the master. The Satan, the Yetzer Hara, is a shliach of Hashem. It's an Eved of Hashem. Hashem created it with a mission. And he's not going to rebel. He says, even though many servants do rebel against the masters, nevertheless, but Avdei Hashem, he says, okay, yeah, servants and Gashmis rebel against the master. But bottom line is, you look at the Avdei Hashem, they're not going to rebel against Hashem. So they're going to do exactly what Hashem wants. I said that. I told you many times, I had this friend. He's a wild guy, still wild. But he went into Chassidus once to the Rabbi, and he opened up about it. So the Rabbi told him, how do I know it? He came out, he told us. The Rabbi told him, your own Yetzer Hara is laughing at you. How foolish you are giving into it. But Avdei Hashem, including the Satan, the Malach HaMavis Yetzer Hara, the get chayis and machayis akel, ech yesh chayis l'davar shekenegdai. So the Gemara asks the question. The Gemara asks the question. If that's the case, how can they go against Hashem? How can the Yetzer Hara go against Hashem? If it's Eved Hashem, and it answers, it's like the Zayin and the Ben HaMelech. That's what the Zohar says, like the Zayin with the Ben Melech. So the Zainer really wants good. This level of Elokus gives, in fact, again, it's a pasuk in Yeshaya, in davening, Dan Shekhneh changed it. But we say right after Baruch Hu, Baruch Hashem Aken Melech Haolam, Yetzer Har, Uber Cheshach, Eis Shalom, Uber Sakel. It's a pasuk in Yeshaya. In Yeshaya, the pasuk doesn't say Ber Sakel. It says Uber Ra. Okay. Baruch Hashem Aken Melech Haolam, Yetzer Har, Uber Cheshach, Eis Shalom, Uber Ra. That means Hashem creates Ra. So what does it mean? Because Shoshim L'maylu Tev. Their but Ukshayed and L'matal Derech Ishtalshalis, but then through all the Tzimtzumim, this level of good, even when it becomes bad, when it comes down, Nasa B'emes Ra Gomor, V'dinim Gemurim, total level of Gevura, B'milid Alma, B'milid Ishmael, whether it's in earthly things and heavenly things. In other words, the Yetzer Hara initially starts in Kedusha. The purpose of its existence is Kedusha. But Hashem brings it down in a way that it becomes Ra. So he says, so therefore he says like this. If the source of evil is Kedusha, he says in a practical level, when a person is suffering, Rachman Litzlan, Yachshev, he should think, it's a lofty level, but this is what you need to think. Don't judge by what you see. That it's evil. It's all good. From Hashem, the pasuk says in Eicha, bad doesn't come from Hashem. But it's Eina Musik Bishvil Shaluyuch Aleider Leil Mashafo V'Nishal Amayl. Because the open good can't come down into the world, it stays there. But the Beryl, it's all the level of Kedusha. And not only that, Al Rebbe explains in Per Chavav of Tanya, that the good of Hashem that comes down in the form of evil is on a higher level than the open revealed good. Because it says, Asher HaGever, it's a pasuk in Tehillim, Asher HaGever Asher Tiyasrenu Yudkei. Fortunate is the person that Yudkei makes you suffer. Okay? So the suffering comes from Yudkei. And then the pasuk at the end of Chumash says, in Azino, Anistaris Lashem Elokeinu, V'aniglis Lanu V'nei Nadelim. The hidden things are for Hashem. V'aniglis, and the revealed levels, is Lanu V'neinu. So it says in Zohar that the suffering comes from Yudkei. V'haniglis is Vav Hei Niglis. The revealed good comes from Vavkei. Now we know Yudkei is higher than Vavkei. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, in Perek Chavav, that the hidden good that comes down here in evil, looking evil, is a much higher level of good than the good that comes out revealed good. So a person needs to understand that when, God forbid, things that look bad happen to us, it's really good. It's really not only is good, it's a very high level of good. But, meaning, this is the real level, is in essence is good. And that's the level b'chol me'edecha. Like he says, Teiv me'ed, he quotes this medrash we said before. Teiv is malach ha'chayim. Me'ed zel malach ha'mavis. How can malach ha'mavis be Teiv me'ed? He says, Shu Teiv me'ed b'li shviv ha'gvul, ela shadayin lo lebali de gilui ve'na musik. Okay, it's not understood yet. But in essence, it's a very high level of good. So if a person realizes no evil comes from Hashem, it looks evil, that's only from our perspective. And we said many times the mashal, if you go into a hospital, somebody who knows nothing about medicine, an African Amazon jungle, whatever, native. Knows nothing about medicine. He goes into a Cedar Sinai, and he sees an operating room. He sees a guy in the bed, okay, and a guy with a white coat, i.e. a doctor, is standing over him about to cut him open. So a person who knows nothing about medicine will scream murderer. The reality is, not only is the doctor not killing the person, the doctor is saving the person's life. Right? So, in other words, because this native thinks it's cruel, the doctor shouldn't do what he needs to do. In other words, because the native is ignorant in this, in medicine. So therefore the doctor shouldn't do what he needs to because this guy thinks it's bad. It doesn't, that's not the way it works. So how much more so infinitely, because the difference between the native and the doctor might be 100 times smarter, 1,000 times smarter, it's a limited level. Hashem's perspective is it's not at all in our realm at all. So in other words, because we think what Hashem is doing is bad, he shouldn't do it. But a Jew needs to, if you have a munah bitachon, then the bitachon is that it not only it will be good, it is good now.
So why pray to change the situation?
So why pray? Because I can ask you a better question. If that's the reality, so we should daven to suffer.
Right.
We should daven to suffer. If suffering is a higher level than revealed good, we should all daven, Hashem, suffer me, make me suffer. So what's the answer? The answer is very simple. Hashem is so infinite. What we're asking Hashem is, give me that higher level of good in a revealed form. That's what we're asking. We're not asking, yes, suffering is a higher level of good, but we don't want to suffer. So we're asking Hashem, do me a favor. Give me that higher level of good in a revealed way. Or like they say to somebody, don't hug me too tight. You know, that's the thing, you're hugging me too tight, it hurts. Hashem's hugging us. But we're foolish. We're foolish. Off the top, there's an interesting shaila in halacha. If somebody is deathly ill, are you allowed to daven that they could die? What should you daven? Are you allowed to daven that they should die? It's a big machlekes in halacha. And they bring a proof that you're allowed to daven that the person should die. The Gemara at the end of Chassidus, when it speaks about Rabbi's passing, so Rabbi had a caretaker, the housekeeper, no? And all the Chacham were davening for Rabbi. Rabbi had what would be called probably stomach cancer. It was stomach ailment. He was tremendous pain. And all the rabbis are davening, he should get better. But she saw his suffering. So she davened, she said to Hashem, take him already. She knew she was there, you know, I mean, she was hanging around the house, she knew what was going on. So she davened, but the other poskim say it's not true. It's a big machlekes in halacha. If you're allowed to daven for somebody to die, what could she do daven? So the real answer is you should daven, Hashem should do a miracle, make him healthy. But in this aspect, this is what we're davening. So he says, "V'zeh yasar yasa yisrani yodkei." That's what we said before. For a different yasa yisrani yudkei, the suffering comes in the level of yudkei. Shu betchilas Hashem, which is the first two letters of Hashem's name. Tchilas is galusi. Shadayin loy bali de gilevein musik. It's not understood. Shadayin loy niskal hakol. It was not revealed. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that a Jew needs to understand that all the Ra that comes into the Jew is really besim good. Even the Malach HaMavis is not only Taiv, it's Taiv Ma'id. So all the suffering of a Jew needs to realize it's really coming from Hashem. But it comes down, it's too great of a level to come down in a way of good, it has to come down in a way of negativity. And that's what he says, V'zeu in Yenochem ish gamzu. The famous Nochem ish gamzu is the Rabbi of one of the rabbis of Rabbi Akiva. Shaya'im e gamzu l'teiva. Okay? He said gamzu l'teiva. What does that mean? Mitnei shayim is bain, and he meditated be'emes. It's interesting. Rabbi Kiva in the Gemara, the famous story of Rabbi Kiva said, whatever Hashem does is for the good. Yeah? That's one thing he said. Nachum ish gamzu said gamzu l'teiva. So Chassidus explains, Nachum ish gamzu was a higher level than Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva said, this is also for the good. Nachum ish gamzu said gamzu l'teiva, this is good. Because he saw Shesheira Sharahu Atev. He saw the source of everything comes from Hashem. It's definitely good. There in that level of Kedusha, you could change the bad to the good. Like Rabbi Chanina ben Deisa said, the Gemara tells the story. Rabbi Chanina ben Deisa was broke, super broke. Okay? Didn't have money for anything. In fact, the Gemara says that Kola Ilam Nizim B'Shvil Chanina B'ni. The whole world is existing because of Chanina ben Deisa. Chanina B'ni, and Chanina, my son, lives on boxer with water. Now, he was broke, okay? But the whole world lived in his house. So one day his daughter came to Erev Shabbos, and she was crying. She had a big problem. There's no oil in the house. By mistake, she lit vinegar. Lit the Shabbos candle with vinegar. They didn't have an oil. So she said, what should I do? So Rabbi Chanina ben Deisa said, Mi shamel Hashemen v'yadlik, the same God that says oil can burn, Yamer l'chaimes v'yadlik, will tell vinegar to burn. And it burned for 24 hours. Which everybody knows vinegar doesn't burn. So what did he do? How did he do it? How did Rabbi Chanina ben Deisa do it? That he made vinegar burn? Because he realized, if you look in the source of everything, like we learned about the Tetzava, even in the level of Etzem, it's also limited that it's Etzem and not Gilui, right? So when you reach a level of Elokus, over there good and bad is equal. In that level of Elokus, there's no, in fact it's a pasuk. The pasuk says, Alei ach Esav leYaakov. Esav and Yaakov are brothers. And then the pasuk continues, Ves Yaakov ahafti, Ves Esav sanesi. Okay? So there's two halves of that pasuk. There's the first half of the pasuk says, Yaakov and Esav are brothers. And then Hashem says in the next half of the pasuk, I love Yaakov and I hate Esav. But what does the first part of the pasuk mean? There's a level in Elokus that Yaakov and Esav, i.e. good and bad, are brothers. They're equal. And now we're there, according to the Alter Rebbe and Tanya, and hear what he's saying, this level of evil is even comes from a higher level of good than good does. Revealed good comes from. So he says this is the level of the Chanina ben Deisa said, in the source of everything, there's no difference. In other words, before Hashem put the characteristics into oil that it burns, and vinegar doesn't burn. That's already when it's identified and classified as vinegar and oil. But if you go back to the source, which is above both, so the oil, what's the difference? There's no difference between vinegar and oil.